welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your podcast host, Keegan, and this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. And today we have a very special guest, and his name is Massimo Rigotti, and he has a very interesting story. He has an interesting background, and boy, oh boy, he's sober too. So, and he's done it in a different way than a lot of us have. So, Massimo, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm just doing fantastic, and I think that's the only way to be, because if you say it, then it's just really easy to be that way every day. Even when you're in trouble, it's just great to just say, hey, I'm fantastic, even if things aren't quite right in your world.
Being in fantastic trouble, that sounds like a different kind of approach at life. I like it.
Well, it keeps you upbeat, because I think that it allows you to look at every situation as a possible solution to your problem. So even when the worst thing arises, if you can see that silver lining, then you're already looking for your solution. And so that new approach that I've put in place in my life, boy, it totally changes my outlook on everything.
Oh, man, I love that. And I never really thought about just the outlook itself changing everything about it, you know? Because it totally does, in a sense. I've always thought of it as a mind shift change or something like that, but I love the whole aspect of just put fantastic in front of it, and it's great.
Yeah. I mean, it's wild how language can have that way of changing your mindset and then finding a solution to something. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. Well, thank you so much, Keegan, for having me on today. And
of course,
I definitely have had a interesting journey to arrive where I am today. So I've written a couple books, and that's where we ended up at the very end. But how did we get there?
Yeah, how did we get here?
So I started out and I had a pretty charmed childhood from all, anyone outward looking in. I was in a 2-parent home. I had great grades. I had friends. But something wasn't quite right. And I didn't really understand what was going on, but I didn't quite feel okay. And about the time I was 8 years old, I discovered that, in fact, my dad was not my dad, and that my mom, I was a product of her first marriage, and they had separated before I was even born.
Oh, wow.
And so here I am, 8 years old in 3rd grade, and there was something that happened, like, with legislatively in the U.S. about that time in the middle of the 80s, and that suddenly whatever your name was on your birth certificate had to be your name, and, like, so the teacher called a name that wasn't my name, and I was like, and then the teacher's like, why aren't you answering? I'm like, that's not me.
That's how you found out?
Yeah.
What? So you got in trouble for not knowing your own name?
Yeah, exactly. I end up in the principal's office. My mom comes and gets me, and then that's when I found out, what are you talking about? Dad's not my dad? And so it's amazing what happens in your existence, that if you have lots of positive things that lay down over the top of any trauma, you will forget things that occurred. My father was interacting with me for like the first 3 years of my life until it just became, well, today it would have been an Amber Alert situation. Back then it was just like track him down and give him a good whooping.
Oh, no. Oh, boy.
But I was able to forget those things. I was just over the age of 3. Yeah, I was there, but those memories actually came back. And then suddenly I'm confronted with these things. And
that's rough.
Yeah, it was wild. Yeah.
So you were dealing with those traumatic memories at such a young age? Holy cow.
Yeah.
Talk about a framework for disaster.
Yeah, but what was really interesting, and I think that this comes from, again, being in a household that was always very positive, I managed to once again, like, start to forget those things, put them out of my mind, lay down positive memories again, and everything kind of seemed okay until I got to college.
Ooh.
And
college.
And then I got to college, and I was having these, like, manic episodes that I didn't understand. I'd be up for, like, 2, 3, 4 days at a time without any sleep. And I went to the campus psychiatrist and was diagnosed as being bipolar. And, but of course, my response to that was, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not bipolar. I'm perfect, right?
Yeah.
And so I didn't go on any medication, but what I did discover was that alcohol would temper that mania.
No. Yeah. Oh no, I already. That's just bad.
Yeah.
That's so bad. I know exactly where this is going because I've been there. I've done that.
Yeah. So here I am. I'm 18. I figured out anytime I feel a little out of sorts, I can just tamper this with alcohol. And that managed to continue for the next 20 years of my life. And,
oh boy, 20 years?
Yeah. I was doing pretty good and solid. I wasn't what I would consider to be a drunk or an alcoholic for at least the first 10 or so years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then I moved to Los Angeles, and I ended up working in the entertainment business, and I represented talent. And so breakfast started with a mimosa, you had a liquid lunch, then you were drinking at dinner, then you went out to some networking party, and before you know it, you're just a complete mess drinking 24 hours a day.
Yeah. And did you really feel like a mess, though? Because, you were a high-functioning alcoholic, as you would probably describe yourself now, right?
Yeah. I mean, at the time, I didn't think anything of it. I mean, outwardly, nobody really thought that I had any challenge, even with my psyche, because I'd managed to hide that with alcohol. And then when things started getting a little, towards the end of my time in L.A., which would be about 2008 or 9, then I added cocaine to the mix.
Oh.
And so then it became, I'm drinking so much, the only way I can keep going is I also have to do some blow.
Starting that good old balancing act.
Yeah, I can have this perfect high and go through the whole day. But again, no one knew.
Because you're just that good at it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's dangerous. That is very dangerous for yourself and everyone.
Tremendously. So I married one of my clients. I ended up going back to Kansas City, leaving the entertainment business, and I started a printing company. And this was in 2009, and things were going really well. And I added a bunch of employees, and business was great. But I continued to increase the amount of alcohol consumption there was until it was at about a handle of Jack Daniels a day. Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot. I'm so glad that you're not doing that now.
That'll really hurt your trust me.
Yeah, it's not like a car and getting oil changes. We don't run like that.
No, but I would joke at the time that because I had stopped eating quite a bit, that my body had basically turned into a processor for Jack Daniels because that was my go-to drink. And I was just like an ethanol, I was running like a car. You hit it on the head. I was just processing ethanol.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that a really heavy alcoholic will hardly eat anything because we can actually derive our calories from alcohol. And whenever you said liquid breakfast, you were not joking. That is a very literal sense. And I'm so glad that we're both out of that race because that sucked.
It was absolutely horrible looking back at it now. But again, I didn't really think anything was wrong. But sometime in early 2012, I felt like the wheels were going to fall off. I could see over the horizon and recognize that I was on an unsustainable path. I was either going to end up dead or I was going to lose everything, one of the two, or both.
Yeah, I know for myself, if I lost everything, I would definitely go with that first option,
Yeah, exactly.
What was it that made you start to really see that the wheels were starting to get that speed wobble?
Well, two things happened. One, I would get up in the middle of the night, and instead of walking down to the kitchen to have a glass of water or something, it was walking down to the kitchen and then taking a shot of Jack Daniels. Yeah. And then going back to bed. And that's not healthy. That was the first thing. And the other thing is that there were a couple times, and I didn't realize just how dependent I had become, where I ran out of alcohol. And I started getting tremors, and I wasn't able to contain, or I was shaking so bad I couldn't write. I couldn't,
that's rough.
You lose that fine motor control, and I recognized at that point, I'm like, okay, I have a problem.
Yeah.
And I wonder if I can do anything about it. And so I tried a couple times unsuccessfully to
white knuckling it.
Well, taper myself off. I was smart enough to know that I was in trouble.
Okay, good. Yeah, alcohol detox can kill.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute.
Oh, boy.
But, so I tapered successfully off once, but it only lasted about a week. And then I didn't try again until later. But seeing where things were going, I filed for divorce from my wife. I told her, I said, look, I'm not going anywhere. This is you'd be better off without me. Wildly, I did the separation there.
Yeah, that's a role reversal right there. I've got to say, on behalf of the spouses that usually have to cut the cord, like, thank you for doing the hard part, because I know that isn't easy on any part.
No.
That is definitely taking the high road, so my hat's is off to you, sir.
well, thank you, Keegan. I mean, and a tribute to my ex-wife, who, it's now coming up on 13 years we've been divorced, is that we're still on speaking terms, and I think a lot of it has to do with that fact.
Yeah.
Is that I recognized what was about to happen. But I held on for a little bit. My company started declining, and ultimately I sold kind of off to another company. I went to work for a group, but then I'd mortgaged my house because I wasn't making that much money. So I go from having like complete control of my life to now I've basically mortgaged my life completely.
Oh, man.
And it was just a matter of time. And so on December 4th of 2014, the sheriff came and threw me out of my house.
Oh, no.
Now I'm homeless.
No, man.
Yeah.
And that was not that long ago.
No.
I mean,
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a little over 10 years ago. But yeah, I mean, because here recently I was thinking, because 10 years ago right now, I was living on the street in 2015.
Yeah.
And so this was a really wild period. But right before I ended up out on the street, just a small little backtrack in 2014, I went on this vacation with some friends to Destin, Florida, and randomly on a beach, I meet this college student, Samantha Thomas, and even though she was 20 years my junior, we just like totally connected. And one of the first things that she said to me was, you would be an awesome person if you would stop putting that poison in your veins.
Oof. Ouch. That's kind of, that cuts deep.
It does. It does, but I liked her so much that I was like, maybe I should try to do something about it. But it wasn't enough to stop where I was going. I mean, I tried, but it just didn't. And so when I was living on the street, she was at the University of Alabama, and I was in the Kansas City area. Eventually, I lost my phone. And so we ended up doing something incredibly old school. We wrote letters. I had a P.O. box, and I would write letter, and she would write letter to me. And in these letters is what really framed up and became what is today the S.O.B.E.R method, is that she would ask me various questions about things, and then I would write down my responses. And really what happened there was a bunch of journaling back and forth, because one of the things that sticks out that I use a lot with people that I work with today is, what was the last thought you had before you wanted that drink? And so I would write all those down.
That's a good question.
Why are you going for that drink? What was the stressor? What was the trigger that took that one? Did you really need it? Was it because you were shaking? Was it? Yeah, I mean, like, and so I was able to define all that. And I remember this particular letter because the letter was so big, I had to go into the post office and ask, like, how much to mail this, because it was thick. It was like sending a novel off to somebody. But
oh boy.
But those,
that's not a letter.
Yeah, that's not a letter. Yeah, I sent her a little novella. But that laid down the foundation. And so as I went through, I mean, there's some crazy things that occurred during the summer of 15. Like, the one thing that I did manage to have, luckily, even though I was living on the street, but I couldn't drive it that often because, of course, where do I get money for gas? Is that I managed to hold on to my car.
Oh, wow. That's
So
awesome.
Well, if you can imagine this, I'm homeless, but I have a 2001 BMW 7 Series. It's not really, it didn't really fit together too well, but that thing got beat up quite a bit over that year because I was still drinking all the time.
Yeah.
But I would go in the summer months. There were times where if I had a little bit of money, I could get out into the countryside, and I would like sleep in fields for a couple of days, and
Oh, it's called camping.
Yeah.
You went camping.
Yeah, okay, you can say that. But the cold is what was really horrible about being on the street,
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, that was really horrible. So in August of that year is where things just got really bad. I had a seizure and was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance, and then that became a couple additional seizures, at which point I was gone for 6 minutes and 18 seconds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're back.
Yeah. I'm really lucky to be back. Mm-hmm. And that laid the groundwork for stepping forward. I still had a relapse after this about a month later. Mm-hmm. And at that time that I had that relapse, I ended up going to rehab for the first time. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
And rehab is really where I connected these dots back to that 8-year-old time period. And this is, so I had this great counselor in rehab. His name is John Hall. And John figured out a couple of things about me that I'd never really realized.
Okay, like what?
Well, he determined that I thought I was always just a really selfish person. That's just how I would define myself. Mm-hmm. And he was convinced that I wasn't selfish, but I was giving so much of myself that I was putting on this mask that I was selfish to defend the fact that I was like giving so much to everybody, and I couldn't hold up the framework of who I really was underneath. This caring individual that wanted to give to people. Mm-hmm. And yet I was someone who was running companies and doing this, and so I put up this really callous front, and so it wasn't myself.
Yeah. Inauthentic.
Yeah, inauthentic. And so many of us are that way. And it's tough. How do you live life that way?
A lot of us don't even realize that we're being inauthentic until someone points it out.
Yeah. Very, very true. Very true. But the other thing that John asked me about that got me thinking is he told me that there's probably a single event in your childhood that you have a piece of trauma that you haven't worked through, and that's what all of this cover-up is for. So I went searching. I mean, I had plenty of time. You don't have a phone. You can't do anything. I mean, rehab is not fun.
No, you just got a lot of time to dig around in your own head.
Yep, exactly. And so here I was right back. I was 8 years old, and I'm in the courthouse and during the adoption hearing, and in leaving that proceeding, I end up overhearing my mom say to somebody, because my father had not shown up to try to fight or get partial custody or anything, and I remember thinking at the time, why isn't he here? Why doesn't he want me? What's wrong with me? Am I, things that a kid thinks. It's like, why am I not lovable?
Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. And then what's really unfortunate is that my mom ends up saying, well, no one really wanted him anyway.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I am so sorry that you had to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry that was even said.
I don't know what context it was said. I've, of course, had a long conversation with my mom about this after figuring out. And she said that she may have said it.
No.
And so that there's been a lot of repair that has happened, and I'm happy that, it's still a work in progress, but thankfully, I feel like that journey to repairing my relationship with my mom is getting much, much better. What might surprise you is that I would have considered us to have a reasonably good relationship until I discovered this in my past.
But I mean, that seems totally reasonable because that means that one pillar of trust was just blown away in an instant. And so, of course, the framework for an entire relationship can go away whenever the keystone pillar is gone, you know? So that was rough, but I'm glad that you're able to be on the road to healing because I can't even imagine that one.
Yeah, that was a tough one. But then I knew what it was.
What was it?
I mean, that was the thing. That one thing was
The
what
root
was
cause.
that was the root cause was that me believing at that moment in time, I realized that every thought after that was not feeling confident about myself, not feeling that I was good enough for anybody, not feeling and then I started looking at all of my relationships and all of my interactions, all my business dealings, and everything ended up landing back at, well, you're not confident at all. You don't have, you're like faking your entire existence. And it's rooted in this thing, and you're using alcohol to glaze over this to allow you to do the things that you feel you're capable and competent to do. And so, I mean, it truly was a personal eureka moment.
Yeah.
And so then I knew what I had to do, and I faced all of this head on. And then just a couple months later, I stood up sober on March 3rd of 2016, and I haven't. Yes, thank you so much. I haven't been tested but one time since then. So
And how did that go?
Well, this one is going to be rough, and there's a bit of black or dark irony, however you want to phrase it, in this story, and that we all remember my good friend Samantha. Well. We continue down the road, and we're still talking, and on August 1st of 2020, she's killed by a drunk driver.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
So
My deepest condolences.
Thank you. Thank you.
Seriously, because I can't imagine having lost someone that brought me into recovery, you know, and someone that got so close, too, at the same time.
Yeah.
So
it was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. And that was the all hands on deck. Everybody around me was like, is Moss going to drink? What do we have to do? Everyone was calling me, you know, are you okay? Can I come stay with you tonight? And
yeah.
You know what's funny, though, is that I didn't have that desire and want to go back into the bottle. I mean, almost instantly, I had this. It was in a matter of 24 hours. Because I had already framed up what is the sober method at this point, and Samantha was encouraging me to write a book about it. She's like, "You're telling everybody about this stuff. Why don't you, start really doing something about it?" And I was like, "Yeah, maybe I will," But I wasn't taking it seriously. But then it just clicked. I was like, you know what? I'm going to write this book. That's what she wanted me to do. And I turned every bit of focus into chronicling exactly how it came to be and what the process was and then, writing it and getting it released. And
oh boy,
I'm just so thankful that she magically appeared in my life on that beach, because I probably wouldn't be alive today.
Yeah.
And the least I can do is honor her legacy and try to help others the way she helped me.
That is way too awesome. I'm so glad that you are carrying on her honor and legacy in that way, because that is a lot, for someone to be able to help someone else beyond the grave. Like, that is way too cool. So, I mean, you got like 3 relationships out of 1, and I think that that's beautiful. So definitely you cherish it, you hold it close to your heart, and that is something that is going to be a cornerstone for your recovery, which is awesome. So I just got to say again, my condolences, but seriously, congratulations at the same time for developing the SOBER method and being sober. So with that, why don't you tell us what the SOBER method is and how it works?
Sure. Well,
so
thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And it doesn't get any easier processing and telling the story because she became just such a huge part of who I am today.
Yeah.
So, but I'm glad that I get to talk about her on a regular basis, because it keeps her alive.
Yeah, for sure. That is awesome. I'm glad to be a part of it.
Yes, thank you. So the SOBER method, it stands for Stoic, Observe, Behavior, Execute, and Restore.
Ooh.
Okay. So this works in a continuous improvement cycle. Do you happen to know anything about the Deming cycle in manufacturing, or ever heard of it?
I've heard of it, yes.
Or like PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act, that is often used in manufacturing as well?
Not that one.
Okay, so the Deming cycle in manufacturing is basically, it's like you plan out what you're going to do, then you create the process for which to do it, and then you execute that process, and then you check the process to make sure everything's okay, and then you make a small improvement, and you go back and you start again and again. So I got the crazy idea that maybe I could treat my mind like a manufacturing plant. That was the genesis of this whole entire deal.
I love it.
So I was in AA, and so we got to back up just a little bit before I was like, I need to do this. Like, let's turn this car around for a second.
Alrighty.
So here I am. I'm out. I'm sober. It's 2016, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to AA. I'm going to be on top of this. And what I found after going to AA about 6 months is I was like, we're talking about everything in the past. I'm standing up at meetings and saying I'm an alcoholic. Well, I don't feel like an alcoholic anymore because I'm sober. So, and then I started questioning how we were treating substance abuse as the disease, and then as a mental health condition. But in every other area of mental health, we always have positive self-enforcement. But in this one small section, substance abuse, we're constantly reaffirming something that we used to be. And so that puzzled me. I was like, that can't be good. And
I agree. It's not good.
Yeah. The other thing that was occurring is that depending on which, chapter or group of AA I went to, oftentimes I would find myself, like, man, that was a really good story. And everybody like, oh, wow, that sounded incredible. And I would think to myself after leaving, maybe I could go do that. I'm like, whoa, wait a second. This is a bad thought, So I have got to do.
Been there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or maybe you've experienced this one too. One time I left an AA meeting and somebody says, hey, do you guys want to go get a drink at the bar next door? And I'm like, what? And like 3 or 4 of them went, and I'm like, it's just one. I'm like, no,
that's not how this works.
Exactly. And so here I am, I'm coming up at the end of 2016, and I'm just like, is this it? I'm sober. Yeah. I just don't feel like I'm making any personal headway in my own existence. What else is there? Yeah. I have to improve something about myself or look to the future instead of the past. And so this happened on New Year's Eve because, everybody was out partying and drinking, but I was at home thinking about how I could turn my brain into a manufacturing plant. And so I went over to my desk, and it's just after midnight, and I'm like charting everything out, and I sketched out what this would be. And originally it was 10 steps, and I called it the Flavors of Confidence method.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, because I am a firm believer that confidence, especially in my own case, but I've now proven it out many, many times again, that confidence is this core thing that you need to really address almost all of your needs and desire to use substances. Because if you felt confident about who you are and what you were doing, you wouldn't feel like you needed any sort of lubricant to do it better. Because you would just be like, I got this. I'm the best at this. That's how you would be.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So that's what it started out as. And so when my first book came out, and I'll come back to this in a second, where we're at in 2016. But when my first book came out, and it was 10 steps, and I'm like trying to teach more people about it, and it's like, okay, this is wildly too complicated. It wasn't ready for market. And so then that's when I got the idea. I'm like, I need a moniker or something that you can call this out. Something about getting yourself sober. And then of course I had another crazy thought. I'm like, I should just call it the SOBER method. And then I said, well, it's 2023. Clearly the SOBER method will be taken.
Nope.
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 So I swooped that right up, and that's how we have the sober method today. But, But so the flavors of confidence, like whole framework and everything, that also came out, and the name of it came out of a self-portrait that Samantha gave me in 2014 before I ended up homeless.
Oh, wow.
So Samantha had her own struggles, but she wasn't, leaning into any substances or anything, but she didn't feel that she was very confident. And this self-portrait it's beautiful, but you stand back from it, it looks like this totally finished, great piece of artwork. But if you get within about 6 inches, you realize that it's like tiny dots of ink on the canvas, and it's made up of probably between 10 and 12,000 dots make up the entire.
Wow.
Yeah, of varying degrees of imprint and coloring, so it looks like a finished piece of art. It's really. It's really remarkable.
Nice.
And when I asked her about it, well, she called it flavors of confidence. And I said, well, what does that mean? And she said, well, I'm just made up of a bunch of pieces of a fake whole. And I was like, explain.
Yeah. That's deep.
Yeah.
That's deep.
Yeah. So she said, well, I'm really okay with like this little thing that I'm capable of and this little thing I'm capable of. But as a whole person, I'm not confident of anything that I'm doing. And I was like, wow, that's wild. And so I really thought about that a lot. And then folding back into recognizing that my own confidence had been held back is when I, picked that up in rehab, I was able to then see that, oh my goodness, she was ahead of her thought process here. I don't think she realized how profound that thought was, because if you are fully formed in your own flavor of confidence, then the confidence that you require to be confident, which is different than what I need. I mean, we all need different things, and that's why the flavors is so unique. It makes it unique to each person.
Yeah.
And so that's what the name came from.
Okay. Sweet.
So,
I love that.
So it was like trying to look at every little thing that you could piece together in yourself and improve, and then kind of lay things down until you became fully confident. But it was complicated, and quite frankly, it was tough to teach. So I when I went back to the drawing board for sober, I was like, okay, first of all, we have to do away with the challenges in AA and NA of laying God into the equation.
That's what kept me out of the room for a long time.
Yeah, it keeps a lot of people out when they need it the most. And I would hear that a lot, and that was concerning to me. It's like, how can I provide something that will dig into one's mind and recognize that they have strength, but does not lay into any divinity. It doesn't keep other religious sects out of the rooms, because
something that's inclusive.
Yeah, it includes all people. And so I landed Stoicism.
Ooh, yes.
And so this is great. And Stoicism and the is kind of on the rise in terms of people know and are leaning into it a lot. And I think that people are leaning into it because as organized religion has declined, especially in this country, there's still a desire for self-improvement.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. And so this is a good way to get it. So
I like that. That's a good way to market it.
Well, the first thing I recommend in the S step is Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. You familiar?
Meditations?
Yeah, by Marcus Aurelius.
The Marcus Aurelius sounds really, really familiar, but I don't know if it's just because it sounds Greek or not.
Well, I mean, anyone who's seen the movie Gladiator probably remembers Marcus Aurelius because he was on the German front and he was about to die, and it was like in the very beginning of the movie. Well, Marcus Aurelius was literally probably the most powerful emperor and leader of a state until probably Napoleon. I mean, like in terms of like strength of his armies and everything. So here's the most powerful man on earth writing into his personal journal, and which has become known as Meditations, in which he would admit that he had faults and that he would question his own process to do things. And am I thinking about this right? Is this the right process to deliver the outcome I'm looking for? One of the more common quotes out of meditations is, well, boiled down is, the obstacle is the way. Yeah. So whatever
the obstacle is in the way, the obstacle is the way.
Yes. Because whatever the most difficult thing that lies in front of you is, you should attack that first.
Swallow the toad.
That's right. Because there's lots of different ways and proverbs that have come about from that very phrase. But if you push through the most difficult thing in your life, then everything else is easy.
Yeah, this is true. This is so true.
But I would say the vast majority of us, including me for most of my life, would say, what's the easiest thing I can do to make a little bit of progress today?
Yeah. What's the least amount of effort I can put in for the most reward?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then you don't really get anywhere. And
no, that's called addiction.
Yes. Bingo. Yes. So in this particular case, you would be looking at what's the most difficult challenge that you face in your life, whatever that is. And so now you're going to look at that and say, okay, what am I going to do? You're going to observe. You're stepping into the observe step. What am I going to do? And how is this impacting my life? What's my biggest obstacle? How do I react to this biggest obstacle? And what is my normal, interaction when this occurs? Obviously I'm leaning into a drink, but what is causing that? What's the underlying fear or the underlying complexity of my emotion that is causing me to want to drink?
Yeah.
Once you discover that, then you're going to move into the behavior step where this is charting out new behavior. This is where you're experimenting with yourself. You're like, okay, this is what I know I have been doing. Let's look at what I might be able to do in order to react to that stimulus differently. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so then you're able to, like, all right, and you play it out in your mind. I mean, I even suggest role playing it if you have a willing participant, just to see how that might work. I mean, and from AA, it's role playing is sometimes kind of fun to do because it tests your ability to can you resist? But it's not real life. It's what I mean. It's not the real thing.
So no pressure, no stress.
Yeah, exactly.
No wrong answers.
Well, once you think you have something that works, you're going to move to the execute step. And this is where the rubber meets the road. It's like, okay, I'm going to go charge right into this situation that is causing me issues. I'm going to use this new behavior I charted out and see if it works. Well, if it works, yeah, you got it. If it doesn't, well, then you go back to the O step and you're like, okay, with this new behavior I just mapped out, what went wrong at what point? And then remap it in behavior and then try it again. And once you have a winning formula, then you move to the restore step. And restore is much like the amends step is in, AANA.
Yeah.
Where
step number 9. Yep.
You're looking now at how does this impact or has it impacted others in my life? So whatever this particular thing you're changing about yourself, can you think of all the people that you impacted with this particular behavior? And, list them out. And, how did it impact? What could I do to correct this situation? Maybe it's just an apology. Maybe, whatever it is. But you're going to reach out to these people and make it right so that you can cross these individuals off your list of, so you're not on their list of people I'm going to hurt today. You don't want to be on that person's list, right? So that's what you do there. And then once you've completed those for all those individuals, then you go back to S and you figure something else out you want to work with. And again, I recommend that you're staying in a Stoic riders. I mean, you could spend at least 3 to 5 years just working through everything that's in meditations to improve yourself, quite frankly. And really find yourself tremendously improved. And I'm in my 137th pass of my own process.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
I think that's something I'm going to have to look into myself. So thank you for that.
Well, please do. I mean, and that's what I was about to say is that what's happened since this came out is that I created this framework specifically for sobriety But I ended up getting letters that it's helped me with my anorexia. It helped me with my phone addiction. This helped me stop chewing my fingernails. And then it's really, I realize now, it doesn't matter what you're trying to improve. It's a holistic self-improvement. And what I did not touch on that are in the O and B steps that aren't related to the mind are improving your health and fitness too, like setting up exercise routines and eating better and healthier habits that line up your life. Yeah.
Like little hygiene, self-care kind of things, the ones that addiction or whenever my self-love is low, I may neglect myself in.
Yeah.
You know? That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. And it sounds like the SOBER method is really something that is a conglomeration of like a whole bunch of experiences, a whole bunch of knowledge, and it sounds just like something from Willy Wonka's candy factory, you know.
That's great. I love it.
I don't know why, but I just got the very first live action movie, the weird little block. I imagined that being the SOBER method. Like, here you go, this will help everything. It's like, yes.
I really kind of hope that it is looked at that way. And I tell you, the greatest challenge that I have is just getting the word out. And that's why I'm so thankful for people like you having me on your show to reach your audience and show them that there are alternatives out there that, because not everyone finds success in AA, NA, other rehab, whatever it is. I mean, some people just turn to their faith and somehow can make it work. Whatever it is, I don't even care if it's the SOBER method. I just want everybody who is struggling with addiction to find themselves on the other side of it, because you know so well what I'm talking about. The clarity of one's mind and the ability to be yourself and to truly hear people and interact with them is just so amazing when you're sober. And I miss that for most of my life, and it's sad.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm right there with you. I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's one of those things that once you experience it, you don't want to let it go. But once we're on the other side of things, we really want other people to hear how we did it, because I know for myself, I tried a whole bunch of things, and it really took pretty much dying to come out of it and say, you know what, that's it, I'm done. I've had my fair share of things, but I still needed help, and that involved rehab. But I can't sit there and tell people like, hey, go to the rehab I went to because it's going to help you, because No, it's not. Trust me. Like, it may and it may not, but you have a method which is going to be able to help people get into recovery, stay in recovery, and just grow beyond recovery. And I think that that's the really special part, because you're on your 137th pass, you said?
Yeah.
And so each time you're sitting there, you're chipping away things on your marble statue, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, big time. I was just going to point that out, is that the things that I am attacking now are, I feel like, so minute compared to what I used to be looking at.
Yeah.
Because now when I look within, I'm like, not to say that I'm perfect, I'm far from that. Yet when I look back, because it's all journaled, and that's the other great thing about it. Part of this process is you look back every time you reach the end of a cycle. You go back and you look at each thing you corrected as a reminder of everything you've improved on yourself. And so by going through that, you're able to see just the breadth of improvement that you've made. And that is another positive reinforcement to keep you going, because you're like, look at all I've done. This is incredible. And but I have a question for you.
Okay. What you got?
So how have you remained sober? What's your secret? Because that would be interesting to me.
Staying sober is, I really hate the idioms and stuff, but it's one day at a time. Sometimes it's 5 minutes at a time, and sometimes it's a conglomeration of things, because my go-to method within the last, say, 5 days has been noticing whenever my body is tensing up, because I have some underlying stress, and I'm not sure what it is. But to sit there and I can kind of feel that awareness in my head that it's kind of like one of those wind-up dolls where you wind it up. I can feel it in my head, and so I have to sit there and just take that step back in my head and take that deep breath and then refocus, recenter, and it may take about 5, 10, 15 seconds, but I'd much rather do 5, 10, 15 seconds than sit there and be in a tizzy for something that'll sit there and get me in a lot of trouble.
Wow. And how long have you been sober now?
I'm going on 4 years.
Well, congrats. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And there's tons of different ways that I do it, but that's really just been the one that's been active the last several days. Now, before that, well, some of the other things that I'll do is exercise in the morning because that'll help get me kind of up and going. But one of the biggest things is really breath work. But, I mean, everything works for me in different levels. Not everything hits the same way every day, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Well, learning that you're bipolar as I am, it's interesting because I find that those who are bipolar that I work with all process it a little bit differently because we're managing other underlying challenges that you know, are difficult to explain to people. You know, you're like, I got other things going on too, you know?
Yeah, I don't know how to explain to someone that it feels like there's another me sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
And that, well, I got a question for you on that front. Does it feel like you can be 50-50 on a subject entirely?
Yeah.
You don't have one preference or another. It's a straight line. It's like I am straight in the middle because I see the validity in both aspects.
Yes, but I think that that's also a testament to the greatness that comes out of the bipolar mind because I mean, I think that those that understand their bipolarism recognize the fact that it does carry a little bit of, generally speaking, there tend to be higher IQ and capable of processing information differently. So I think that we have the ability, bipolar, to step kind of outside of ourselves and look at things like we're looking at them. Yeah, like we're looking at the world and we can see, oh, this guy's thinking this and this guy's thinking this and this guy's thinking this. Like,
see,
you know.
This is really, really weird, but I was literally just talking to one of my coworkers about how I don't know how to explain to some people that it's like I'm living in a third, like, person kind of thing, and it's like, well, how does this person know this, and how does this, and I was like, I don't know how to explain it because I've never had someone kind of tell me about it, and you just, like, blew my mind because I was like, holy crap, someone put it into words for me. Thank you.
Well, good. Please use that as an example because that's kind of how you look at it. I kind of see the world as like, you ever play with the little Lego guys as a kid? It's like, except you've created, and you're like, you can see in your coworker example, you'd be like, well, that's the reason that Donna thinks of this is because Jim's over here and he has this belief about something, but Steve, you know, he's the real person causing the issue. And the way that I really feel about it is like literally right in the dead center of these three people. And because I can see everything and meld it together, I'm like, they could solve their problem if they would just do this.
Yeah.
You ever get that? You're like,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Thank you for just shedding some light on my own stuff because it's one thing to be able to like have it in my head, but to actually hear someone else say it is like, thank you, I'm not alone. And it's just like recovery all over again. Just like getting into rehab, you know, just like, oh, holy cow, I'm not alone. I'm not the only drunk person ever.
Isn't it wild that you feel that way when you're, I mean, I know I do. It's like, oh, I'm the only one going through all of this, which is wild when I just went through this and anyone listening or watching is going to be like, okay, these guys just said they can see the viewpoint of all these different people, but they couldn't step out of themselves and recognize that there were more than them. I mean, like...
I know, it's a paradox.
It is. It is the wildest thing. So, okay, yeah, we definitely have that in common.
Yep.
It's too funny.
Oh man, it is way too funny, but it does go to show that there is one of those things that dual diagnosis or dual recovery, as I've also heard it put. And so it's kind of like you're being a black sheep of the black sheep, and you've got two invisible things that you're fighting, and instead of one, and either the AA people are going to be like, well, the bipolar isn't real, or the bipolar people are going to be like, well, AA isn't real, and then you're just sitting here just like, I'm in the middle again. This sucks.
Yeah, it really does. But I think that the difference for me became when I decided after I got sober that I wasn't going to be ashamed of being bipolar anymore. Instead, I was determined to recognize that it was my superpower.
Yeah,
I
like that.
I have this superpower, and it's the ability to see things and the world in ways that no one else can see it. And then to begin to use it by looking at how I could interject myself to get the best outcome. And because I'd never done that before. I had always kind of somewhat played the victim in situations.
Yeah, because it's easier to go with the flow than it is to actually,
Yeah, and then I changed my whole mindset. I'm like, if you understand what everyone is thinking and probably going to do, how about you just weave yourself through that thread and then you're going to achieve what you want to, and everyone's going to be happy, but you're going to be further ahead. And then everyone's going to wonder, is like, how did you get there? So that's what I've done. I literally decided that I was going to make it my superpower. And I think that works because I'm no longer ashamed to tell people I'm bipolar. I hid it my whole life.
Yeah. And I mean, I still have little twinges of shame here and there because it's one of those things that like, oh, I'm bipolar, you know, just like, I'm like, oh, I can't say it like that because people are going to look at me weird because it's one of those things that has been programmed into me is that diagnosis is bad. But that's kind of the thing is that I'm here to say, no, they're not. It's a label of sorts. It's something that gives us an idea of what we can look at, something that we can observe to change, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And along that same vein, and if I remember correctly, you recently had someone on your show who is challenged with schizophrenia. And
Dale,
yes, thank you.
Yep.
And this is a group of individuals that I was confronted with for the first time in a lot of numbers was on the street because there's a disproportionate number of homeless people, unfortunately, that are schizophrenic because they're either unwilling or unable to find themselves integrated back into society, which is a real shame. But their minds are just some of the most amazing things.
Oh, yeah.
But they don't express themselves the same way that most people do, which makes it difficult for people to interact really well with them. I thought your interview with Dale was fantastic because you were able to weave a story out of him that was, and I could tell that there were probably at points it may have been a challenging interview, but it really was. It really told a good story, and maybe it was because I was able to understand like what he was attempting to say at points, whereas others may not recognize like how incredible it is for him to hold his frame to have an interview like that. That was like remarkable.
Yeah, interviewing him was really, really cool, and the aftertake with him was really fun too. So I was like, man, I wish we were still recording. Dang it.
Yeah. No, that's great. It's fantastic, and thank you for putting someone like that on the show because it's those are the types of experiences that if more people are aware, then well, education is kind of the root of everybody accepting and recognizing that things they're afraid of or they have no reason to be afraid of.
Yeah, because it's just literally things that I don't know that scare me that will make me act in a not positive manner towards. And that's the thing, is that if I'm educated, if I understand it, it's kind of like electricity. If you understand what electricity is, how it works, you don't really have to be afraid of it. You can respect it, but you definitely just need to at least understand it.
Yeah, well put.
And that's kind of just a lot of mental health, but schizophrenia especially, it's one of those that is super misunderstood, and it is one that I think each person has their personality multiplied by 20 probably, and so they're just beautiful people. Yeah. And so if they have a bad episode, it's just like anyone else having a bad day, It's just amplified. So
yeah, it's a good way of
fault.
It's a good way of putting it. And if you really look at some of the ways that it's expressed and boil it back down, you recognize that it's exactly what you said. It's just somebody like 10x what they normally would be, you know, what you would expect someone to be at. It's just 10x that, you know.
Yeah.
And most people can't process that or understand what's going on. They're like, I'm getting out of here, as opposed to, oh. And if you're calm and just respond back, you quickly diffuse the situation. It's just like they feel like they're not being heard. That's why they went to 10x.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And that's the same way that a lot of people, whenever they're not feeling heard, like in a debate, they'll sit there and they'll raise their voice because I'm not being heard. And it's like, well, you are, but your point just isn't valid.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was a great episode. So thank you for that. That was a really good interview. I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you for checking it out. It was really awesome interviewing him, just like it's been awesome interviewing you. And I do hate to say this, but we are right near the end of this episode. And this is literally no peer pressure or anything, but do you think we could get you on in the future for catching up, how we go over the SOBER method, maybe a little bit more in depth, maybe examples?
Sure.
And then, I mean,
I would love to be back, and we can dig deeper. I've really enjoyed my conversation with you, Keegan, and quite frankly, it's great to meet someone like-minded and to understand that you're not alone in some of the other things that go on in my mind.
Yeah, and I'm so glad to hear that you'll be back on, and I'm just so glad to have someone like you on the show and just in life. So I've got to thank you on behalf of everyone that you've helped, whether you know it or not. And I've just got to say thank you to the audience for listening. But this has been Massimo Rigotti with Retrieving Sanity and his SOBER method. Hey, I forgot. We do have a couple of little closing things we got real quick. What shout outs do you got?
Well, I just like everybody to know that I'm on all social medias at SOBER method. Just started a community over in Reddit, the same thing, SOBER method, and that's going well so far. We're just 2 weeks out of the gate, but that's an
nice,
exciting thing to get going, because I'm trying to interact more and just allow that to kind of naturally occur. And something I'm planning to do here as summer begins is a weekly just ask me anything, where I'm going to open up a Zoom channel for, you know, anybody who wants to join, and we'll, you know, I can answer questions live, and I think that that'll be a big help to anybody who wants to join. So sobermethod.com is my website, and all the info will be there when it goes live.
Sweet. All right, everyone, y'all heard it here first, sobermethod.com, and be sure to check out that Zoom call stuff, because that sounds really, really cool. But I got one question for you. Do you know a number that someone in the U.S. can call if they're having a mental crisis?
Off the top of my head? I should know this number.
It is 988.
988.
Yes, sir.
All right.
So it doesn't have to be just suicidal ideation. Someone could have a bad breakup. Someone could have gotten a B on their report card. If it is putting them in stress, they can call 988. So if we can teach our children how to dial 911, why can't we teach our friends and loved ones how to dial 988? We can maybe save another life or two, right?
That's right. Maybe we could teach Massimo 988 too. So thank you.
Well, thank you for being on the show, and everyone out there, y'all have a great night, and we'll catch y'all next week. Shalom.